You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
If you have a questioning nature and a desire to nourish your essence within you have reached the realm of truth, live from inner space, it's the next sequel to Interactive Enlightenment, brought to you by your host, Sevan Bomar. Enjoy non-stop breakthroughs, advanced knowledge, and self-discovery to the core of your very essence. Join us as we map the blueprint to the cosmos and dissolve the mysteries of the Matrix. You are now connected to the KEYMAKER. Give me some.
Wholeness and boundless vibrations to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of the KEYMAKER. It is episode 8, the Revelator. And before I get into this today, we're going to do a little check to make sure that the sound's coming through clear enough and make sure that the audio is configured properly. So if you're listening to the show today and you're utilizing the chat box, then if you can give us a notification that you hear me loud and clear, that would be great. And while I wait on that notification, I just wanted to say to everyone, thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this collective frequency that's allowing us to continuously broadcast across not only this world, but multiple worlds. And I say that because I'm sure many of us have already had those dreams to where we're in the dream and we're trying to wake other people up in the dream. I mean, you're just going on and on about how consciousness is alive and how a person needs to get themselves together. And then you find yourself delivering those messages through the dream. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a really, really good insight about exactly what's going on. There's always something new with the KEYMAKER series, as it should be, because we're not just creators, we're originators. And there's a big difference to create something. I mean, you can create children, but to originate something, meaning that it begins with you, that is actually the beginning of the unfoldment of the secret of the unbegotten, to where something just comes from nothing. And so what I'm going to do is, because we've talked about a lot of things on these last few shows, and it's been building. Like last show, we started to discuss reverse engineering technology in order to assess the true aspects of the spiritual realm and how the spiritual realm really functions and what could be possibly the inner workings to how our spiritual progress and our spiritual creation works. And we know for sure now that what private industry, third party, governments, military, industrial complexes, et cetera, are doing is they're taking the spiritual knowledge, converting it into technology, and then presenting that technology to everyone. And thus technology has now become everyone's spirituality. I won't say everyone, but people who do get deeply into their cell phone, deeply into the Facebook. We know that if they spent that time actually utilizing their own spiritual being and dealing with the correspondences to those technologies, for instance, the eyes, the camera, the computers, the brain, et cetera, then they would be wax strong and available to deliver messages just like these to those that are around them and also consistently to themselves. We've discussed how balance is necessary in this matrix right now, and balance is not something that you just do and then it's always like that. It's done. Balance is something that you have to constantly continue to practice and continue to stay in tune with. So I'm going to do everyone a favor today on the show and try to remain as real as possible. You know, sometimes you look over your mind and you say, man, can I really say that? Or, you know, are they really going to take that the right way? And it's just because, you know, English has so many pitfalls. It has so many traps embedded within the language that you can often say things that you really meant to say something entirely different, and the words just come out another kind of way. So the only thing that we can really do is govern the intention of the words and then watch the tones and the vibrations that come from the words in order to present deeper meaning. So the first part of this, of course, is just introduction. It says KeyMaker episode 8. This episode is called The Revelator. And the definition of the revelator is one who actually reveals the will of God. But now, since you know the identity of the real God, which is you, self, and we're using God, the term loosely in attempts to meaning the supreme being, you can definitely say that what the revelator is one who reveals your will. So that means that we have to today discuss your will. Now, of course, you would normally be doing this with yourself, but somehow we've gotten just a little bit off track. So we can utilize each other in order to make sure that we get back on track and stay on track. That's what we're here for, is we're here to assist one another in our progress. So that way we don't have to make a continuous level of mistakes if we're trying to discover something new about self. So obviously we just went over this Christmas holiday, and oh my, I can see why that sometimes is signified as the lowest point of the solar cycle if you're on Earth, because, you know, all the red and Santa, the Satan running around, and not just that, but the program. I mean, just the entire program of everyone living in the fallacy and the illusion of the day itself had the environment feeling a little bit weird 2 days before, 2 days after, or whatever the radius that covers that particular holiday. But it's a real thing. I mean, sometimes you just want to smack people and tell them, hey, wake up. You know, Santa Claus is not even real, while they're gathering and putting a bunch of packages and toys and making a bunch of traffic and playing like they care about other people. I mean, it just gets so low that day. So it's really good to be ascending out of that portal and going into 2016. And this is, since we're at the depths anyway, because we can survive in both darkness and light, we're going to take this time to go deeper into what we know to be the truth and how this whole thing functions in order to get some major clarity about what's happening here. So, you know, I used to talk about this a long time ago. I mean, this is now, again, 6-7 years. But I just remembered something yesterday after a quite amazing dream or vision that I came out of. And I remembered, you know, first and foremost, it's my place with the people. And meaning that I've actually dedicated a large chunk, if not this complete lifetime, to assisting others in their expansion and in their awakening. And that's what I do. That's something that I don't have to pretend. This is something I've been doing for years. And it's because that I believe personally that I breached this matrix, its codes, and how it functions a long time ago. And I really caught that hint today because I remember once again that I actually used to lucid dream as a kid. And I never really hear people talk about their childhood and say that, yeah, I was lucid dreaming then, and then I lost the ability to lucid dream. But that is really my profile, that I was lucid dreaming at the age of, 6-7 years old, doing silly things in the dream, like trying to pull bikes out of the dream and trying to pull objects out of the dream and that I didn't have in this world into this world. And I started thinking about that today, and I realized that obviously you have to already come into the knowledge of lucid dreaming before you're capable of doing something like that. And this would mean that I probably spent several past lifetimes, if you may, actually working with my own consciousness to get to this point of being able to do something about what's going on in the matrix. Now, we have to remember that some of us always talk about, well, why did I come here? Because there has to be, in a sense, some kind of purpose attached to why we visit constructs like this. And I can only say that the number one reason why many people are here is to do something. That's how it works. You have a purpose, and that purpose could be no greater than being tied into actually revealing the truth about what's going on in this matrix and allowing people to escape this trap. I mean, let's just say it as it really is. I mean, we could go in circles at times if we refuse to confront the truth about what's going on in this matrix and how it's actually functioning in order to actually start to go at it. Because when you really start thinking about it, you have to awake the revelator within. You have to awake what reveals to you your will and reveals to you that as self, that you are supreme. So that way you can restore. And what we call this is the term is indivisible. This means that you're not able to be divided. You don't actually have questions about, when I say you're the supreme, trying to pass the ball, the baton, or the torch onto some other being that is virtually invisible or lived millions of years ago or in the sky or whatever, but more, as they say, be here now. This is about realizing that everything is encompassed within self right here and right at this point. So in saying that, when you really start thinking about it, I'm sure, quote unquote, they would rather that we go quiet into the night. And I started thinking about this, because some people say, well, your message is a little bit, rowdy and you may need to tone it down. And, you talk about controversial stuff. Maybe you need to switch your topics. I listen to your show. It seems like you're skipping around. And then, they go on and on and on, because what it's really saying is, oh, don't upset master. Don't say the wrong things against God. And, people have so many different check programs and trigger programs and prison programs installed that they're just sitting back there quiet about what exactly actually really happening, not only to, the external world, but to them. Because, we face day to day poison. Like the society that we're dealing with is attempting to poison us from all angles. But yet, we're told to sit back, remain calm. And like I said, they would rather that you just go quiet into the night. And so if you say nothing, if you do nothing, you'll have the same outcome as the rest of the people who say nothing and do nothing. And now we got billions of people, or millions at least. We got billions of people who have passed through this matrix, all humble, in one of these religious structures, mind controlled, and then they leave the matrix with little to any clue about what's really happening within their own consciousness. And this is something that you're responsible for stopping. So again, if you say nothing and if you do nothing, you'll have the same outcome as the rest of the people who say nothing and do nothing. And this is not about, what others are saying and what others are doing. This is about what you're saying and what you're doing. Don't allow this system to allow you to remain on idle, to where you're just listening to what's coming in from people and then imagining that that's somehow your part. And that's why we challenge people to get out there and to actually do something physically to make a change, to reverberate and vibe that frequency. Don't play the game of the mind control, because the mind control is to keep you in your mind where you think about things, but you don't actually do them. That's mind control, to live vicariously through thoughts, but not actually put the time, the attention, and the efforts into allowing those thoughts to manifest. But today we're also going to talk about how those abilities of thought are powerful when they're focused the proper way, when you really understand what you're doing. So what I want to talk about first is, or one of the things is the underlining speech these days in some of the, what I believe is some of the greatest movies, especially in relation to time travel that have come out. You'll always hear this speech repeated in the movie or in the subset, and it says, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, yes, rage against the dying of the light." And you hear that in the Interstellar, you hear it in Dangerous Minds, you hear it in Independence Day, you hear it on Doctor Who. And what this is really about is it's actually summoning the attitude that you have to begin to assess and accept within your own consciousness. Because if you just go gently into the night, meaning if you're just that quiet being that's sitting there doing nothing, letting these people run all over you and tell you what to do and destroy your mom, your brother, your sister, your auntie, your uncle, you are going gently into the night, the good night, meaning that, you die, you never left a legacy, nobody even knows who you are, you're shrouded by all the other people in the cemetery, et cetera, and then we never hear from you again. If you rage against that, you can break through the barriers of time. You can develop a personality and a character and a being that is so strong that you can pierce through light. So long after you're quote unquote gone from the matrix, you're still felt, and people still can tap into your energy and your wavelength and your force, just as if you were present and still alive during the entire duration, and still be able to access your powers and your abilities as in the vein of all itself. We have to remember, since last show, we talked about how you transcend this time, how you transcend all of this, these limitations of the physical matrix by utilizing the powers and the capabilities in which you possess. And that means telekinesis. That means you can communicate with someone across great distances, breaking the idea that, you need to be in cell phone range or you need to be in radio range in order to be able to tap into those people. You can tap into ancestral forces that have existed thousands of years ago. You can receive transmissions from the future. And that's just the scratching the surface of what we're capable of doing. And I said before that, you see, what happened is that towards the end of the 21st century, the computers went quantum. And this is actually what you're seeing happening now. The first quantum computer, one of the first major quantum computers, is the human. It is the first quantum computer. Let me put that first on the table. Humans are quantum computers because they're capable of working beyond binary, meaning that they don't just have a 0 and a 1 and stay either 0 and 1. That's what the computers have done to the reality. They like to make people either choose one or the other. But our original creation, as we are now, we're capable of being positive and negative simultaneously. And this is the onset of what a quantum processor is capable of doing. So with that being said, you start to realize that when things go quantum, they break all of the physical boundaries. They break all of the mechanics of even what we call physics, and they transcend those mechanics. So I don't want to get too technical here for people today, but I want you to see that in reverse engineering quantum computing, you now get the total aspect of what's going on in the cosmos and who we are as a quantum creation. Because if you want to use their creation of the quantum computer, is a direct emulation of how the cosmos functions. It's the direct emulation of how your soul actually works. So they give you the mechanics. And so if you sit down, I think the one of the videos that I watched, and you should watch the jargon in this video, is from Idea City. Maybe somebody can pull up that. It's Idea City on YouTube. All you have to do in Google is type in Idea City quantum computer. And then you'll get a recording from a gentleman named Mr. Rose, who designed the D-Wave quantum computer. And what he attempts to do is he attempts to explain in only a language that we can understand, since English has a boundary with trying to explain quantum computing, which I'll explain later of why that's the case. He explains to you what quantum computers are capable of doing. And then when you flip what's being said over into your spiritual mind and start to really assess, okay, well, what's really being said here, you start to realize, oh my goodness, this is it. This is the precipice, because after the digital age comes the quantum, but we're already there. So since we're quantum, this means that you're actually able to receive messages and codes across time. And so what I personally believe is that's what happened, is that around this same time, 6 or 7 years ago, this was started on December the 21st, I started receiving these transmissions in light code in which I went into a high vibratory frequency and then came back or forward, depending upon how you're looking at it, with all this information that took years to unpack and decrypt. So something quantum, it could have been a computer, it could have been another person's consciousness, it could have been me, who cares? Something quantum began to send encoded messages back into the past or back into this segment in time in order for them to be decrypted, to reveal the impending danger of not just the reality being destroyed, but a being's consciousness that is vast. So when you reach quantum, you're actually in a quantum family. So in the quantum family, we're always going to send frequencies, messages, to those who can receive them, signals, if you may, that allow people to grasp that signal and begin to get information and pull it out of the aether. And then it, for a while, seems like their idea until they start realizing, hey, something's synchronistic going on. There's other people around me that are also feeling this same way, getting this same information. And it's because you're tapping into the quantum frequency. And this is only the beginning. What actually is at stake here is the ability to go beyond this construct. See, I see this construct now from what I understand, even just recently, like the movie Predator, to where there's an entire construct developed that still presents certain limitations. And this is why it's hard to find, like you don't find a person just directly telling you, hey, if you want to get it out, here's exactly how to get out. Here's what exists in this place that you call out. This is something that has to be figured out. And on top of that, it starts to baffle and confuse people about what you're even talking about when you start using the English language. See, but this time, 2016, which is where we're going into next, if we're using a time mark, it's going to be different for many of us. And it's because it'll be the time in which we take our world back. They, if you want to use that term, will see the rage, even if it's just from me, because it doesn't matter anymore. I started realizing, whatever the repercussions behind you raging against this fake, false, illusionary matrix, it wouldn't matter anyway based on the total outcome of the mind control and the programming that's being done. So if you have your wits about you still have your cognizance, and you haven't been completely mind controlled, then this is the time to assess what's really happening and to grab every tool at your disposal in order to actually break out of this. Because the thing is that you could see how it is. It's like fluoride. It just starts to lull you to sleep. It starts to put you to sleep to where every single day starts to become the same day. You follow this cycle. You become a creature of habit. But yet any major change, that's not even on the win. And I have to say this even for myself. This is something that I have to deal with myself, is that when I say, okay, the message was great, but we need to transcend English. We need to transcend this language. Why? It's because what I've come to discover, even more so now than ever, is that English actually doesn't encase the part of the program necessary to break out of a matrix. When you start even saying the sequence of words that are necessary for a person to come into realization that they are inside of this, there's a breakup within the language. Like it stops there. And this is why when we start talking about things like transcending time and going into other frequencies and all that, for most people, it's over their head, because they're dealing with a language that for so long, it deals with go to the store. It deals with take a bath. It deals with things of a lower and fleshly level. It wasn't designed to speak on things of a quantum level. And that's why computers are not programmed in English even. Quantum computers definitely are not programmed in English. Look at how it pairs up here. Computers, BASIC is the closest computer language to English. Nobody uses BASIC anymore. It's obsolete. They use Fortran, COBOL, basically codes that just look like symbols. So when you cross that back over to spirituality, if we're using a language to program ourselves and the language can't even program a computer, how can it program, or how can it even give a quantum computer the proper integers to operate on its full power? So this is where the danger comes in for them or they, is because now we're on to them. We realize that it's only going to take a moment to crack this code completely. And a moment means, because we're going quantum, 2 or 3 more months, even within this conversation today. And I'm waiting for the first half to be over so we can dig deeper into it. But after today, so much more is going to make sense, but it's going to do more than make sense. It's going to actually give you the tools and the ability to be fully sure, meaning the confirmation of what you're actually doing within the dream world and what you're setting out to do on a consistent basis. So that way you start drilling. You drill to break down the walls that are causing you to be divided from yourself. Because when you are continuously divided, and I'll talk about this just a little bit, but see, it's a stack of cards. It's the original concept of the moment. And actually, I have to wait until I get, because I'll be skipping too far ahead. And, I'm very mindful of the time that it takes to actually get out a complete, I guess the only word we have to use here is concept. So you see, and what I started noticing was that, the English language is wired for us to go into conflicts. It's wired for us to disagree with one another. It's wired for us to not believe in one another. The more that a person actually begins to talk, if there's not some kind of connection and trust there with the individuals that they're talking to, then the person is just completely into duality after a while. So let us watch for this. Sometimes they say if you're talking, you're not listening. And if you're thinking, then you're sending and you're not receiving. Today, I have something for you. I have a message for you. And then it's necessary to actually process this. And then when you process it fully and when it clicks, you'll go quantum. And then once you go quantum, then you'll be on the level of the cosmos. But to say that we're already operating on that level is a gross mistake. And this is where we have to become adepts and adults. The adept knows what he doesn't or she doesn't know, and admits that and then sets out to learn it. The adept doesn't just assume, oh, I already know all of that, and then cost the life of themselves, their family members, and everyone else because of that haughtiness and pride and of non-realization that, hey, there's something that I can learn here. So today it's time to learn something. And even for me, I'm going to be going through this publicly for the second or third time, but I'm going to be speaking it out loud, which allows me to process it, because we have to remember when we talk, see, when you think in your mind, you're processing it one way. When you talk, it goes out into a vibration and then it goes back in through your ear. Of course, I can hear myself talk right now, but if I stop talking and I just talk in my mind, I can still hear myself talk. But what is the difference between the levels of transmission? The difference is the level of processing. So when I say something out loud and then it goes back into my two ears, I'm processing it different than if I just think it in my mind. And why those things may seem like similars or that, it doesn't really matter, they matter a lot. And that's why don't go gently into the night. Say what you need to say. Express yourself to what you need to, and how you need to express yourself in order to fully confirm your will, because if you don't, you will be guaranteed to have the same outcome of those who don't. But if you do, like I say, if you don't try, you'll fail 100% of the time. But if you do try, then there's that chance that you can succeed.
Radio Ranch with Robert Sales, Monday through Friday on Truth Frequency Radio.
That's beautiful. This world, our light.
And we're forward, and we're just getting started here. I'm just getting warmed up, and today I'm really looking to just get in depth with the message and to really transmit beyond this language how imperative it is for us to not only understand this message, but begin to communicate. Well, we've always been communicating on the quantum level, but really to begin to access that space as a space that we can all enjoy one another and actually pull ourselves out of this. And a big part of that is actually to charge up. And realistically, my time here it moves so fast. Everyone always comments to when they come in this environment, days just fly by. And, I credit it to the high vibratory frequency, but this also makes it extremely difficult to get an excessive amount of things done. Like, we're just doing so much and we're working on so many different levels. I mean, even when I sleep, I go right into the dream world and then I start doing the work there. But even more so now than ever, there's been some kind of major shift within the last few days. And I've received, once again, some kind of upgrade because I'm still building more and more energy off of that initial boost that I got 7 years ago when going into the high vibration and coming into full contact with self. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of that energy today. And this energy is going to transcend the conversation. And you'll see the adjustments in the continuous boost that you receive after this conversation and even during it, just from receiving what is being transmitted. So you look to tap into another wavelength in order to receive what's for you, because I'm running across a spectrum of cosmic quantum frequencies. And, why it may seem even new agey. I mean, I think that when you use the word new age, oftentimes there's the new age deception. And we have to realize that the key word in that is deception. The new age is used to mark a time in which your consciousness goes quantum. It goes into a completely different spectrum. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's when you add other words to the new age, that's when you have to examine, well, what are we talking about? So the first part of this is to charge. Like you're going to need the energy, the clarity, and the consciousness that's necessary to boost yourself into this kind of frequency. Because if you understand the big thing with quantum computing and why even computers have a limitation, it's because of power. That you can only run so many processors on the power grid. So they have actually a calculation about how fast the processors will keep going over time. And they've so far been on target until just recently, because the processing speed is getting higher than the power regulation. And this is something that we can now flip back into spirituality. And we say, okay, well, when you start having all these concepts of massive awakening, and then, telekinesis, teleportation, tapping into different wavelengths, harmonic frequencies, awakening a world, what you actually start running into with this is you run into a power problem. You run into that there's actually not enough energetic potential coursing through the organic field in order for you to be able to accomplish that. So you need to charge. And in order to charge, you have to avoid spending currency, time, energy, emotional energy on things that simply don't matter one way or another. And I'll give you an example of that. The reason is because we actually damage our consciousness when we send it over the same old silly drills. I call it double backing. Like basically a person 2-3 years later still talking about the aliens. 2-3 years later still getting on Barack Obama. 2-3 years later still talking about 9/11. See, that's called double backing. That's a part of the mind control, because it keeps the person in that same loop of, well, whoever did 9/11, what can you do about it? And how does that actually change things? Now, initially, when you find something out like that, it does have a power attached to it, because it, for many people, woke them up to realizing that, hey, maybe this government is not exactly who I think it is. And that sometimes sparks them to go into other aspects of figuring out, well, where else could there be lies? Could there be lies in religion? Could there be lies in? So then it's transformative. But to the person who becomes the 9/11 guru, that keeps looking over the information and then exhausts themselves with all the information and exhausts others with the data of something that either way they can't do anything about. See, now that's when the energy is removed. Okay, so we can damage our consciousness by pushing it through the same old silly drills. Like if I keep taking you through the same drills, like even in the 9/11 thing, it said, is this real world or exercise? Because there have been so many exercises that when the real thing started happening, people were like, hey, is this the real thing? Or, is this just an exercise? So remember that if we keep sending ourselves, excuse me, I pushed the wrong button. I was actually attempting to keep people from texting me on my Skype while I was on the show. But so if you can hear me, just let me know, and then I'll go ahead and keep continuing. But what I was talking about is I was talking about taking your consciousness through the same silly drills, and then it loses all of its power and it's not able to charge. And once again, if someone can confirm that they can hear me clearly in the chat box, then I'll go ahead and keep going with today's message. Okay, great. So let's just take it from something simple, because it's going on all around you. But okay, so let's say, for instance, some say the president's an alien. Okay. And they spent thousands of hours of their energy and their current and their charge by telling others this, digging into more information, trying to find connections to it, right? But they never realize, because sometimes when you go to the root, you find the truth. They never realized that the whole concept of an alien actually was birthed from H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft comes up with this entire story about the chthonic beings, the creatures of the deep. But if you really understand the entire work, you realize, and as it was written within the work itself, that Lovecraft had this hatred towards blacks and immigrants, Chinese, and propelled his story into the same concept of the subhuman theory, where blacks were seen as subhuman, Serbs were seen as subhuman, Chinese were seen as subhuman, hence the term chthonic, subhumans, right? And aliens as in illegal immigrants, because the consciousness of these people was extremely racist. If you study the entire thing, it all centers around Hitler, it centers around the Nazis, centers around Nordic traditions of white power, and all this kind of stuff is then rolled into this story about these aliens. So then Orson Welles and many of these people who bought the concept of the alien to everyone were inspired by Lovecraft's Chthonian traditions, but which were originally founded on the concepts. And even when he wrote about these aliens, they're very black and they're very ugly. And he was writing his racial persuasion out. Because now what we've come to learn, if you've been learning anything, especially from these messages, is that all is self. So if there's any other life forms out there, they can only be another variation of self. But when we're taught to alienate them, and we're taught to even hate them, to be afraid of them, or even to worship them, or to think that they have some kind of intelligence that we don't have, now it's become the game, the energy draining game. So when you realize what's going on, you'll find that this is actually the big part of quantum computing. This is how your power is being used. Ideas are seated within your consciousness, my consciousness, everyone else's consciousness. They're seated, and then we're left to do all the labors to develop what they're going to become. So then a concept that could be so far-fetched and really off target in regards to what it's actually explaining, hence the alien conceptions and ideas, start to become shaped, formed, and fashioned into something that we actually believe by none other than ourselves. So we see then the dangers of when you're dealing with this knowledge that it doesn't actually even matter. Because if you don't have any real factual information and factual experience, then it actually drains your power. It doesn't allow you to charge up. And this is why, because there's a leak. And the leaks come when you can't actually solve something. And then we'll get into tarot here in a minute. But it's like one card is removed, so there's a hole. It's a hole in the wheel. Okay, so just follow me with this. So if our entire life path is the tarot from the different stages that we metamorphosize through, this is also the zodiac. When there's a concept that is placed into the wheel that can't be solved, we don't know where the aliens come from. We don't know who they are. One of those seeds that don't have a real origin, those are GMO. This GMO seed or illusionary concept is then implanted into your mental, physical, spiritual real estate, your lot of land. That's your allotment. This is what belongs to you, your consciousness. And then it's left there to be developed. And because we are creative beings, we are storytelling beings, if we don't find a place to put it, then we build a whole story around it. But that story will have so many holes in it because it's not the truth. It will have no origins to it. That's what GMO is. GMO, there's no origins to it. You see, so this is how you begin to connect it. So once you have one of these things growing, then you can't actually connect your will. And because, meaning you can't solve, you can't figure it all out. And because you can't figure it all out, this deflates you. The moment that even you get into a high vibration, you start to think, well, what about the aliens? What if I go into the aliens? That's just unknown. And then because that's where the energy leaks. Okay, so this is how this game is being played. And this is a cold game. That's why I come here to end the game. Yeah, there was a movie called Ender's Game, because this has gone on long enough. And that's why I was saying that, I'm not going gently into the good night. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to rage against the dying light. I'm not going to allow my species, my biorhythm, my ilk, my children, my friends, my family, even these enemies per se, to go into this subhuman state of consciousness just because they're told by someone else and something else that they're not great. When I have now every single factual level of proving this, I can prove it so much more than it can be disapproved. So I'm going to keep going. So remember, what happens here is that the quantum age, it comes after the digital. So remember last time I was talking about years ago how, it's like following the money. If you want to know where we're going next, you need to follow quote unquote God. The God is what everyone is worshiping. Okay. So people, they hate to admit it, but they're worshiping the money. And this has been going on since the beginning of what we call time, that these elements, as you see, that we went into the golden age, we went into the industrial age. All these are elements, right? And then when we go into those ages, whatever that age is, it actually becomes our form of currency. The people who know how to operate and deal the most with those kind of things, like during the industrial age, masonry was very heavy because you needed to learn how to build, shape, form, and fashion and fabricate. When the computer age came, then engineers and everyone, computer engineers and people who do programs and all that's come forth. Then when the space age comes in, that's your propulsion. And so all these different ages are actually the form of currency. So what we have to realize is that we realize, okay, let me head this off at the past. Remember what we were talking about last show, that, at this rate, it's like a treadmill. We're only basically reciting the past. People are going in the past. They're trying to find the truth from the past. And I'm going to be talking about that today too, how you won't get straight answers from the past. The past is constantly being altered. Not only is it altered by people who come up with more stories of things that they never got a chance to experience. It's like, if you're telling me about 5,000 years ago with the pharaohs or in Kemet, were you there? Because that's the only way at times, unless we use the blueprint, that we can authenticate most of the information coming from that aspect. Not to mention, are you studying the people or are you studying the royalty? Because even right now, if I go study the Queen of England, I'm not going to get a really good insight about the people in Britain. I'm going to get the insight about the bougie crowd that basically is making up 1% of the entire country. Not, what are the people doing? Right? So we can't even realize what went on in the past by just studying the royals. Now, the royals' information is really all you find in most cases, hence the king and the priest. So what I'm saying is, when we start checking all this stuff back, what we realize is it's just sheer belief. It's not anything factual, but because we've allowed those seeds to be planted, seeds that it doesn't actually even matter. At the end of the day, if your father was the Pharaoh, what is that to you right now? I heard this guy on the radio the other day, and he was talking about he's the reincarnation of Ra on Coast to Coast. Homie, how are you going to be Ra using a telephone? How does that even work? All the greatness, all the power of whatever is supposed to be dictated is now into this person that basically is on this phone, sound like they're about to die. See, it just doesn't connect, right? But still, you have people listening like they did with the David Wilcox. Oh, I'm this person. And I even dated a girl that was the same name, and she looked like the guy that he dated. And then they go on and on with this, but what does it really even matter? Besides self-gratification, it's not going to break the matrix, hence why these people are still in the matrix. See, I'm not here to start telling people about things just to get them to stick around all the rest of their life and listening to this message. I'm here to crack the matrix, and when I do that, I'm going to be gone and then back again and gone again, because that will be the duty, is to keep cracking it for more and more people. But to just sit back and act like everything's okay and all namaste, this is not what's going on here. And I can prove it in so many ways, but I can also give the formulas of how to exonerate oneself from this system. So what we're talking about is that what comes after this digital, because digital was so close. You see the effect that it's having on the reality with these TVs, these cell phones, etc. It's so close. But there's one more thing coming after it, and that's quantum. And when you study quantum, just the term, don't study quantum computing only. That's, again, new age deception. Deception's the key word. Quantum computing. Computing's the key word. Don't study just quantum computing. Study quantum and what it means. And quantum means that you can function and do several things at one time. That's the main definition. You can actually operate on several parallels at one time to solve problems. That's what the universe is doing. Even if universe C is destroyed, universe B has a solution for the destruction of universe C. Universe C is then reloaded and then fixed. So this is like when you learn something from someone, and then that same thing, if you hadn't learned it 5 years before that mistake was about to happen, then you would have just ran into that mistake. That's quantum. Even what you're learning here, you will grow exponentially because it will take you beyond what it may have taken me to actually learn it. That is exponential quantum growth. So this universe, contrary to what they keep trying to introduce, is not binary. The universe is binary. There's binary stars, binary sun. We have a binary sun. And that's the BS. This universe is actually quantum. That's how it's still here. If it was binary, it would have been gone a long time ago, because it would be trying to figure out only which one it could be, not the triplicity, not the hyperdimensionality. And we know that exists now. So what you can also start seeing is that the universe is actually using the humans as the quantum processors. I'll say that again. The universe, the cosmos, etc., is actually using us humans as the quantum processors. So this is how it works. We have our own quantum processor, and we work for a quantum processor. That's the as above, so below connection to it. It's like the greatest job, because not only do you get the ability to have everything in the company, you also work for the company. That's the best way to actually explain it. You have your own company inside of the major company, and they're duplicates and replicas of each other. But if somehow you forget how to use your quantum processor inside of a quantum processor, then you become hosted by that quantum processor. And we've talked about this in the KEYMAKER series, that if you don't take the reins of your life, then what ends up happening is that the strongest mind, the strongest consciousness wins. And then you end up following in this pattern or this path that's been cut out. And I'm going to be talking about that here in the next stage of understanding this path that's actually been cut out. But before I do that, I want you to understand that the key to the quantum processor is that it can actually do things simultaneously, versus the binary only does two things. Well, so we can do more than two things at once. The binary, it can only do one or the other. You see? So that's what computers like. It's either a 0 or a 1. It can't do both. And the reason why I'm drilling this in is because, see, the quantum, if you study it, that's their, what do you say? It's significant as the motor. It's significant as anything that's ever been introduced into the reality. So that lets you know now that you can reverse engineer that this is that next stage to where if you understand how to calculate this, if you understand how to interpret this, you realize that they're attempting to actually build us. That's like their fascination in science, is to create a live, functioning, sentient being. Is it not? That's the whole fascination with AI. But it's because something is attempting to prove that it can do the same thing that we already do naturally. So it's like trying to crack the code, but in such a malevolent way. It's like, see, we naturally have the ability to realize what's going on. Something has gotten itself so artificial that it can't even come into the realization. Like, if you watch some of these scientific websites, what I'm talking about is that they're like, on Google, they're saying, well, Google purchased its first quantum computer in hopes that it may unlock the secrets to nature. Go look it up. Google purchases a quantum computer in hopes that it may unlock the secret to nature. Oh my goodness. Our ancestors knew the secret to nature already. You, in getting yourself tuned in, especially with any chakra activating substances, mainly breath, can learn the secret to nature, right? So something that we already had access to through our quantumness, they are attempting to create a machine that can actually do that. So it shows you the parallel here. So in your quantum system, you can understand the secret to nature. So to even show you more that the universe is actually using humans as the quantum processors is because we call this collective consciousness. This is why it's always even stated by people that, I work for the cosmos, or I work for the universe. Universe, whatever you want me to do, universe did it for me. It's because there is a sheer understanding in the depth of our consciousness that we actually work in tandem as quantum processors. But here's the issue. You have to remember still that you have the whole, you have everything within you. Because if not, then what starts to play out is this game, okay? And this game, which is a solar-based game, comes out like a card game. And this card game, which we'll talk about when we come into from the next break, they're the stages on the wheel or the house. It's the stages on the wheel or the house of cards, okay? And this is 52 cards come out. That's 52 weeks in a year. 13 cards per suit. That's the 13 signs of the zodiac, including Ophiuchus. We have a red suit and a black suit. Or the red and the black. That's red for male, which is positive, and black for female, which is negative. We have the 4 suits. That's the 4 elements. That's fire, air, earth, and water. We have the 4 seasons. We have the 12 court cards. Those are, of course, the 12 months in the year, because that is the division. And that's what actually the cross stands for. And when we come forward, what we'll start looking into is this program, this particular house of cards, this is the wheel. And this is why you're always seeing them carry these crosses around with the circle all around it, because these are solar symbols of the division. And this division, which I'm going to take a note here now, is the big key to realizing what's actually happening here. Like, how does this really look on the back end? Like, what's actually happened here to put us in this form of consciousness to where we think that we're just one of these characters. Oh, I'm the king of hearts this life. Or I'm the ace, or I'm the 2 of clubs, and I need to avoid this ace of spades. But when you really look at the system, because it's an ancient solar game, it does bear a lot of connection, the zodiac, etc. But it's because it's the program. It's the program of division fed into the quantum computer to where each person plays a role. Each person plays an aspect. But if you notice, each person has a strength, but they also have weaknesses. Like, let's say, for instance, if you're fire, you're also not water. You have this ability to do all this stuff with fire, but no water. And this is how you realize what goes on in division, is that you actually have this unique character or trait, but when it comes to all the rest of the stuff, you lack. And this is how you begin to become indivisible, is you solve this riddle of this house of cards, and then you put yourself back together. So when we come forward, we're going to talk about rotating through characters, how to become indivisible, and then most importantly, how to begin to access the parallels in order to bring yourself into the total position of who you are and how that actually looks, because many of us are seeking some kind of physical confirmation that's actually taking place, but you're actually not going to see it in the physical because of the limitations of the construct of the physical realities. So this gets deep. This starts to allow us to
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
And we're forward again, and we're just getting warmed up still. Like this is quite a bit to grasp, and it's because we may have the next two shows just about encompassing this full realization of what it is to be quantum. And the reason is because of this. Okay, so we understand that this tarot deck has a high relation also to magic, like you see gypsies with it. And obviously the term gypsy comes from Egyptian. And then this even traces back further to the mathematics that were in Egypt, and it traces further back to what exactly went on with the divisions, the measurements of souls, etc. Because what this actually comes to for in modern speak is the story of the monad, or this actual being that's supposed to be known as the supreme being or God, divides itself or splits itself into two. And then from that process splits into 4 and then to 8, and then accomplishes what we call mitosis. So when you look into that on just a spiritual level, what you begin to realize is what you're getting is the correlation of how we have so many different characters. And what this house of cards really is about. Like I talked about earlier, why is it? It's our time system, the months, the year. It's our personality. It's all these different things because it actually is the division of the monad. And now since we know that there's no Santa Claus in the sky as God, white beard, etc., that it's actually we're talking about us. What you can begin to realize is that you're a house of cards. Except in this particular reality, you're playing generally one card. And all your other cards are strewn out across multiple parallel realities. And I'm going to prove this by fact. Today, when you get off the phone, you're going to know 100% that there's other realities. Some people have been waiting on this. If they had the little sign say, I want to believe. They've been waiting on this. But today, beyond the shadow of doubt, you will know that there is another reality, at least one, that does exist. But more than that, it's a complete 360 degrees of realities. And what you have the opportunity to do when you become indivisible is to begin to collect yourself from those realities in order to become a prime. And then when you become a prime, you actually are fully collected. You don't have the same division going on, so you transcend time. Because remember what we're talking about. When you go quantum, that's where telekinesis, all those kind of things are working on a quantum level. That's why it's all about simultaneous. You need to be able to tap into several different lines, several different minds. This is where all that comes from. So let's make it literal and logical here and realize that going quantum gives you this ability to transcend time. So you don't need to be worrying about, am I going to die? And what is everyone else going to look like? And all those things are once again burning energy, decharging you because you're worrying about things that don't even matter. The goal is to become completely connected, to become completely collected, okay? As we term it, remember. So you have these stages on the wheel or the house of the cards. And this creates in our consciousness time. Because every time we look at what we can't do, then we start to gander off in times to when we will be able to do that. Or when we see parts and traits and characters from other decks, pieces of cards in the deck, we then think about them and how they can do that and we can't. But then when we start to realize, well, wait a minute. And that's why I say, hey, are you playing with a full deck? Because it's the truth. Are you actually completely collected or are you still divided? Because the divided God actually has that issue of not actually, the divided human has the issue of not being able to access totality. Isn't that the divided God, or the Demerger story is more or less trapped in a hell-like state? This is any human that is divided, is trapped into illusionary planes because of the madness that goes along with not having all your powers and abilities. Now, that same madness is replete within most of the questions that I get, all of our feelings about this matrix and not being able to access the power that we truly know that we have. But this is how it all connects. So, also, what you notice with the tarot is that there of each card, so let's say, for instance, 2, there's a 2 negative and there's a 2 positive. And I want to explain it like 2, for some people, it means duality, it means conflict, right? But 2 also means friendship. 2 also means connectivity. So there's this positive side of 2 and there's this negative side of 2. And you'll find that all the numbers have that there's this positive and negative side to them. And I'm going to be starting semester 2 off with really drilling into the full meaning of each of these numbers. So what happens, though, is when you get into the negative side of a number, so this is how the numbers work. 1 negative, 1 positive, 2 negative, 2 positive, 3 negative, 3 positive. You see, so it works in that sequence. So if you go backwards, let's say, you go from 3 positive to 3 negative, then from 3 negative to 2 positive, from 2 positive to 2 negative, then from 2 negative to 1 positive. You see? So what actually happens when you get into the negative aspect of your character is you go back a number, let's say. We're just using this on a hypothetical level because, many of us know that 0 seems to be the most powerful. But we're just talking about this from a contextual level to be able to come into the realization of what's happening. When you go into the negative aspects of your character, you go back to your previous stage, per se. And then, but you go into the positive of your previous stage. So this is like, okay, if you go back, you're on the top, but if you go back down, which is less for you, but still a positive aspect of the previous number. And I don't want to make this confusing, but just understand that when you go into your negatives, you go back to your next jump down is actually back to the positives. And this is how the whole thing works. This is how the whole system works. So what happens is when you begin to see these are parallels, and that you're actually this divided God, you begin to start to see that, well, wait a minute, this means that my other aspects of me I'm actually in tune with most of the time when I'm in this dream. And because remember, if you're talking about a whole spectrum, you have a whole spectrum of different characters out there that are all still you. So there is a fully negative, dark side of you that is running around abandoned, running around one of the parallels. You have a completely positive, ultraviolet source of yourself that's running around one of the spectrums. And then what we do at night, because we have all these walls between us and these characters, is we vicariously live through these different decks of different aspects of these frequencies, these degrees, based on our own energy. Like, so if you're negative that night, then you go into maybe the negative aspect of who you are on another parallel. And this is so serious because we actually spend so much time sleep. You start to realize that, hey, this is actually an accessible plane that I can do work on. And when you start realizing that, that's when you start connecting things. And then so the first 2 times around, or the first time around, then the second time around, that's 720 degrees. And when you do 720 degrees, you actually start seeing 2 of things in the reality. Meaning that you may see someone in the room and then go to the next room and the person's in the other room. And you'll be like, wait a minute, that person was in the other room. Because when you first make your first circumference, your first anu, you can still visually see the duplicates. This is the onset of merging parallel realities, is that you actually start seeing duplicates in the reality. But as you keep going further up, you actually don't look anymore for physical confirmations because it's transcending physicality. So what I want to tell everyone today is, remember, this is only 3,000 years of domination, okay? And it's clear, like when you look into our history that we can recount as fact, you have groups of people that have gone across the world raping, pillaging, and despoiling everyone to get the matrix to the state that it's in right now. And this has only been going on for the last 3,000 years. This has not been an indefinite thing. So this also makes us have to realize that since 1% of the world is somewhat thinking they're in control, this is not about color either. They're coming from every spectrum, but that 1%. And again, that this is not an ongoing scenario, that we have no idea what the future is really going to hold. See, we're acting like this is always goes on. It's always been like this. 3,000 years is nothing for an immortal. So what's happening here is that we're taking this 3,000 years and we become so demoralized, we're not realizing that, wait a minute, these people, whoever they are, have only mobilized what they have going on within the last 3,000 years, and they actually haven't made much progress into the last 100 years. And the reason is because they didn't have technology. Like, we would love to put it in the hand, and that's why they want to play the extraterrestrial card. They're doing us just like they do to people over in the Middle East when they show them these comic books and these X-Men and these weapons and these video games and them going out and destroying them with these futuristic weapons and all that. That's all mind control, because it makes these people think, oh my goodness, if we attack them, they're going to call Captain America. We don't know what's going to happen, what these people have. But see, they've been doing that same game, playing like they have power for thousands of years. And they've had really no power until the last 100 years. So it's just smoke and mirrors. It's all the Wizard of Oz kind of stuff. The smoke and mirrors to make you think, Hollywood and, action heroes and all this to make you think that they have so much power. But no one or no being with so much power would carry on this way. That's logic. So what we're dealing with here is that for only the last 80 to 100 years, we've seen this unfoldment of technology. This is Skunk Works, Lockheed Martin, JPL, etc., who has only been bent on actually just creating weapons, not even really penetrating this. Only until recently did they start penetrating this for the far-reaching effects like organ regeneration and those kind of things. So don't let these people, this 1%, fool you that they have all this power for thousands of years and that they're aliens and they've been transcending consciousness and universes with time travel. See, that's the whole joke. When they can get everyone to buy into that, then they're like, oh yeah, everyone's like, well, my goodness, the controllers, they're alien beings. They've been controlling far sectors of the galaxy, and they have spaceships and they hover over the planet. And that becomes how our minds are used, our collective consciousness is used to manifest these eidolons and this energy fields that become difficult for others to actually triumph over. So notice the play. And see, anybody whose parents or great-grandparents have been in the struggle know about this on a subconscious level. If you migrated from Poland when the potatoes had gone blight, if you came from Africa on them ships, if you was coming out of Japan after the major war, if you was there in Angkor Wat when the flood happened, if you were in Mesoamerica when they showed up on the horizon with those ships, if you have that, which is the profile of 99% of the population, actually, it's even more than 99%, because just like we talked about last show, the people who are making up that 1% are actually people who have been convinced to follow the kings. So you see what's happening here? It's all smoke and mirrors so they can get mobilized with this technology so that they can really finally do something. But guess what? They can't do anything. It's our consciousness that is damaging us the most, because we go into these dreams and we create all these different things when we can be really doing something else. And so I'm going to get into that. So this is, again, not an ongoing scenario. These folks just came into power no more than 100 years ago. They just got technology. They're still in a land grab. They can't actually figure out how to control all of humanity except for through this technology. And this is what they've been up to for the last 50 years, 60 years. Don't Don't be fooled that this has been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years by some extraterrestrial race from a planet that spins around the galaxy only every 26,000 years and destroys everything in its path. That's the fiction. That's what they want you to believe. But what this is really about is we're quantum beings stuck in a binary, illusionary reality. And until we unlock the quantum potential within our own consciousness, then we will be dealing with chaos. So that's why I say we don't have any idea what the future holds, because if they only got technology 50 to 80 years ago, that's not much time. That's like your granddad's lifespan. So this means what plans they actually have for the future when they finally can really get some control, because they don't even have it now, is really unknown. And I would love to keep it that way, meaning never let them succeed. Do not go gently into the night. Do not let them succeed, because if it's only been 80 years and now they got the little, finally figured out, look how dense this species of creature is. This 1% is been plunged into darkness in its own consciousness, where it takes it this long to figure out what we knew already forever. That shows you right there. If we already knew the secrets to nature and these people are still trying to figure out the secret to nature, you can go to Colombia and sit with the shaman and he'll tell you the secrets to the nature. You see? So this will show you it's like you can't see the forest for the trees with this kind of land grab, debasing slavery mindset, which these beings are in. And don't make no mistake, they love to be in that frequency because it's all they know. They're making up that 1% of the spectrum that is plunged into darkness. So this is what this is about. So now, this is where the secrets come in. Since we have no idea what the future holds, we must create the future. And time travel is possible through quantum technology. It is quantum technology that works time travel. They got a new movie coming out called Synchronicity. I just saw the previews to it. And I'm just wondering, well, why doesn't somebody just start making little B-rated movies and at least take some of these names that these people are, now they got Synchronicity, now they got Interstellar, and you see what I mean? So it's all because we're not acting. We're just sitting back, like, hey, we're powerless, like one card in a deck, feeling powerless when you're the whole thing. And that's what this conversation is about, because we'll start realizing, I need to tap into the other degrees of myself. And so I'm building this so, I can't bring this out right away. It's just because it could get confusing. So I have to slow this down. So realize this. So because quantum technology is the key to time travel, which takes place in the dream world, because in the quantum, there's no such thing as the physical. So you can see dead grandpa. You can see Cleopatra. You can see across time, because the same mechanics that you're quantum. You're not a time being. See, so when you come into this reality, what I'm saying, this illusionary reality based on time, a divided tarot deck, has all these things such as the time that divides you from the true consciousness and the concept of who you really are. But meanwhile, everything is really on quantum. So you think that this is the real world when the dream is really the real world. Real is denoted by where you have the most power and ability. In a dream, you can fly. Here, you can't fly. So which one is real? See, real is determined based on where's the most that you can do. And you know that because when something happens that is impacting, you say, man, that's real. But when it's so soft and you can't even see it, then that's illusion. But in the dream, because you can be in there crying, you can be in there listening to different things, and you can be in there doing so much that you cannot do here. When you weigh the two, you start realizing if you weren't being so susceptible to programming, to where you start using your dream space to plant the seeds of these false illusionary consciousness, like aliens and all this kind of stuff, abductions, etc. All that time and energy could be spent collecting yourself on these other wavelengths, receiving knowledge from yourself on these other wavelengths. And again, because quantum technology is real and our consciousness is being used to move things around in the past, this leads to what we call the Mandela effect, the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is when things have been altered from the past to where something that once was one way only few people notice, but it's not the same way anymore. It's like, well, shoot, the Mandela effect was named after in one timeline when Nelson Mandela died. In this timeline, Nelson Mandela is alive. Mandela died in prison on one timeline. In this timeline, he died another way. So you see, this thing is, you have to be a stickler for detail. You have to be very conscious. There's a website called the Mandela Effect, and it lists all of these kind of synchronicities. And I found 80% of them to be true. But this happens, rather than getting stuck on that. Because remember, some of this stuff, it can boost you. It's going to boost you, but you can't ride on that. You have to let that take you to where you go next. Don't stay stuck. It's just a level on the ladder. But once you confirm the Mandela effect is taking place, then you understand it's quantum technology. So this means the past is altered. So if you look to the past to try to answer things, if you look to this immediate illusionary past to try to answer things about yourself, it will continuously be moved around and you won't find anything firm. So you must tap into the quantum because that form of time travel is not physical. It operates on the same mechanics as thought projection, telekinesis, those kind of things. That's the vehicle that you can travel through time. Do you see? So when you're trying to take your own physical body through time, it can't go. It doesn't have that kind of mechanics. It's not designed like that. Everyone in the reality thinks that, oh, shoot, I can't time travel with my body. So that's solid. But those who tap into their hyper state of consciousness use their hyper state, that vehicle, slicker and more aerodynamic than a Bugatti. They use that vehicle to travel through time. So last night, I was doing it. Last night, I was in this, you can't call it a dream. It was like a vision. And I was listening to this song called Never Gone by Tupac Shakur. And I'm listening to the song and it's moving me to tears because the song is so deep. And then I'm holding this instant animation device. And how this device works is what's being audibly played on the screen, you see an animation of it through themes. So when the beat of the song changes, the color and the theme of the application changes, allowing you to immerse yourself deeper into the song. And I'm sitting here listening to the lyrics of the song. Now, how am I going to be in a dream listening to a song that doesn't exist, word for word, and using tech that does not exist? How is that possible? It's because it does exist. And this is also why, especially people who do music, when you start doing music a lot, you start getting songs in your dream. This is where some of the best songs have ever come from. People have been inspired by songs they've heard in their dream. And this gives you the key because what they're doing is they're going into the other parallel of themselves and then they're pulling back that information. And then with the ability to, play by sound, like some people who are generally musicians can play by sound. They can hear a tone, then go right back and start playing that. Because just in that aspect, because they're so focused on their music, they start to pull, they know what they need next. I need another song. I need something hot, man. I need a hot beat. They go into this quantum realm and then they pull the hot beat in the song right from the quantum realm. And then they bring it back here because they still have 360 degrees of themselves. But what they're doing is they're focusing. They're focusing to where they're pulling all their energy into one point. And they're ordering it up like a menu. Hey, me, give me this. And me comes back with, oh, hey, here's something you already had. It's just a sequence. So this is, you got to really listen to this stuff because this is what's happening. When you look into the dream world, it's viable to pull data and also change things. Because the other things that I was noticing in this dream is that I constantly interact even with my mother on other parallels, waking her up. Like, Mom, here's the consciousness, and this is this, and this is this, the words are backwards. And I go in on her, and then she goes into this whole denial thing, right? And then it's a reoccurring dream. And I said, man, well, why do I keep having this dream? And then, after, years of this, My mom finally made the total transformation and totally realized what I've been talking about all this time. And it's because why? It's because I'm working on another level. And you can do this. It's like you're chiseling it down. Because remember this, the more powerful you are, this can happen literally overnight. But, as you get more familiar with what you're doing, you keep going in and you keep going in on the different parallels until you make the cycle. That's why I said 720 degrees. If you go around twice, meaning you visit all of your parallels twice, duplicates start showing up in the realm. See, we're on the brink. This is not, I don't have time. I have to always put the addendum here. I don't have time to be playing around. I'm not going to be playing around in the matrix where they're killing folks like they're doing in Gaza and like they're doing over there with the people migrating from the countries. And I feel those people. I know what they're going through. That's the reason why I cannot just sit back over here comfortable because, maybe my life is roses, but other people's lives aren't. So that to me means, man, I'm not going to sit back here and I'm not going to take a break on this and I'm not going gently into the night. I'm going to crack this thing, even if it means me needing to get another set of consciousness. Anything I have to do to break out of this illusionary matrix and to break others out of this matrix, that's what I'm here for. I'm not here to play game, to talk about the same thing over and over again. I must crack through. And it's because of that we start to realize, hey, there's some kind of connection going on here with the technology, the spirituality, et cetera, et cetera. Let's reverse engineer this and get the blueprint. So when we come forward, we got one more segment of the conversation today. It's going to get even deeper. Wholeness. Let's hear it in a minute.
Your DIY Health with Jim Ram. Thursdays on Truth Frequency Radio.
Wholeness, we're forward again, and we've actually made it to the last part of the show. And man, I just feel like it went so fast. Like I haven't even got into questions yet. So kind of to speed up a little bit here, just so all of it comes forth. But the first thing again to remember here is that the language, okay, the language doesn't offer the comprehension level to explain quantum actions, because quantum goes beyond language. So what this means is this means that how the reality is designed is that it doesn't actually have a door out, because everyone thinks that they think. That's the thing. It's because everyone's thinking and using language as a communication with themselves, it leaves no exit to the matrix. This is, again, like a predator construct to where, you get shrubbery, you get plants, you get animals, you get sunlight, you even get elements and minerals. But when it comes to the full comprehension of how to exit stage left, it's just not available. And it's because of the limitation of the construct of the language. And the only way that you can transcend that is to begin to go quantum. Go quantum with your consciousness, meaning you're beginning to access the field in which thought projection, telekinesis, etc. exist on. And this is why you understand this is the limitation of the language, because even when we start talking about that, it seems fanciful. This is when the language is being bent to its boundaries. Versus in other languages, when you start talking about different forms of energy, when you start talking about different types of current going through the body, prana, etc., then there's a whole entire vocabulary for that. We have words just as simple as spirituality, ascension, activation, and consciousness. And between that, maybe you could throw in innovation. There's not many words. So you got, in a language of thousands of words, you only have 5 or 6 to explain the massive level of consciousness in which you're to reach. And then those are encrypted and construed so much that even they don't even give an inkling of insight of what actually needs to be done. Not that words ever were very useful to actually causing the effect of what spirituality in the quantum stage does. And this is because quantum manifestation does not function on language, just like even computers don't function on BASIC anymore, meaning the computer language that is closest to the English language, or programming code that's closest to the English language, i.e. BASIC. Nobody uses BASIC anymore. So we're still running on worse than BASIC. And so when we try to access our quantum computer from a level of realization that comes through the language, it's non-accessible. It's locked out. It just comes back with the error code. So then when we go in the dream and we try to use that same language, talking to people, communicating that kind of way, it gives us back distorted error codes. Okay? So this is where you start to realize how much power your consciousness does have just in sheer projection about what you want. Tapping into the feeling of what you want to see for yourself. And remember, don't go gently into the night. Don't let anyone tell you what you should have, what you shouldn't have, what you can do, what you can't do. Let no one make any constructs for you, because you're going to have to deal with that eternally. Also seizing this lifetime, this one here, to make your progress. Because if you're here now and you're comprehending even 30% of this, the rest of the 70% is going to come through on a whole different level. And also, this is the kind of conversation, especially since we're just now going quantum, to try to decrypt this and put it into English, could take a couple more shows. But trust me, we'll be on it. So the last parts of this is to realize, again, that from every aspect of our existence right now, we are being poisoned. I'll say that again. From every aspect of our existence right now, we're being poisoned. There are billions of us on the planet right now suffering as robotized nutritional slaves with limited thought boundaries. And that's happening because we're embedded with stories like, let's say, okay, Noah. People believe in Noah, in the Noah story. So according to the story, this person has put 2 of every single animal and that is on land, including insects, into this ark. But if you look at the sheer profile of the insects alone, we ain't going to include the animals on the planet, to act like 2 of those could be put into a wooden ship and then tossed about on the sea out of their habitat for months, and then make it out of the boat back on dry land to later on repopulate the world. That shows you the depth of the mind control. And remember, billions are involved here. So then when you're in the atmosphere of billions of mammals, human beings with souls and quantum computers on board that are completely unaware of what they believe in and who they are, and they've been reprogrammed, now do you see where you are? Right? So even in the craziest movies don't even come close to this, because you have yourself in there even watching the movie while living the movie. That's how it works with quantum computing. You can be in it and then actually be looking at it. And this somehow, it becomes like Narcissus. It becomes like the mitosis process. You start to divide without even realizing the depth of the damage that you begin to do to yourself. And then you can lose yourself. But you can also find yourself. See, that's the thing. You can even find yourself while losing yourself. There's been many times to where we've done things that have pulled us of what we thought into the wrong direction, to later on rise triumphant because of that experience. That's quantum computing. But let's just say that's going quantum. Okay, just to keep the word computer out of it. So let's just look at this again. So when you study health, you realize that it's even everything about, just to show you what's being done to our people, everything that's given on welfare is a poison. Welfare cheese, all of the pus and all of the bacterias and all of the bleach and all the stuff that's in cheese. Welfare butter, all the plastic and what the process of the butter and what has been put through, and then all the powdered milk. You see, so even alone, cheese, powdered milk, and butter is the worst poison. You will kill anyone with that or leave them in what's called temporary sanity. You can even read this in the books of the FDA, that the chemicals being used cause temporary insanity. But if the person is eating it all the time, that temporary insanity becomes permanent. And all the time they're functioning in this level of insanity. And this is why when you go to talk to them about this, that, and the other, they don't have time for you. They don't understand what you're saying. So then what do? You don't just leave them behind. You go quantum. Many of you have the ability to go into your realm and find those same people there and begin to break down the walls there using a quantum power. And you have the energy to do this. So this is how we work. This is what 2016 is about. I've been quantum, but now I'm stepping it up. So answering some questions here. David Alexander asked if I stay awake. And now this question was pretty complex because basically what the person is asking is if they stay awake all the time, will they somehow get access to more energy? And what I think I began to answer this question last conversation. I wasn't able to finish because we didn't have enough time left. But to clarify, sleep deprivation, it shows that the human being does begin to hallucinate, because what happens is when you break down the physical body, it basically taps out. It goes to sleep. And then what remains is your mental body and your spiritual body. And this causes you to begin to see things that the spirit body and the mental body are more apt to seeing, since the body is not holding your consciousness as much. So this person continues with their question. When we are awake, are we spending currency or energy? If we stay awake longer than 24 hours, will we have access to more currency? And, again, there's some slight misconception here about how it works. But just to clarify, our energetic consumption while awake and sleep comes from our engagement with the reality and how emotionally taxing that can be literally. So our current is taxed literally with how much emotional energy, especially negative emotional mostly charged energy that we're putting into something. So just because we stay awake longer, it doesn't mean that we'll have access to more energy. Since if you don't sleep, more than likely anything you're engaging in, you'll be performing very poorly on the physical plane. So to make things even clearer, we have a great deal of energy mismanagement via emotional strain. And just the brain gym, thinking about things that don't even matter, the Hanuman, the monkey mind, the deck of cards, altering into different states of consciousness, but never becoming indivisible. So if we want to actually build energetic currency, we need to avoid those things and not think it's just a game. Okay, well, I'm going to tune into Buddy's conversation about XYZ. I don't even want to get if anything I say right now, most of the time it's going to be somebody out there doing it, and they're going to be thinking I'm talking about him, because there's just so many people beating their heads against the wall. But the thing is that this is costing us. And that's why I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, look, I'm always willing to try something different. So I have an open mind, and that open mind is so vast, it allows me to say, hey, quantum computing is actually the system the cosmos is running on based how this guy is explaining it. Let me go ahead and decrypt the entire thing and see if there's anything in there, if there's any jewels. And sure enough, the jewels become, this is not running on an actual language. And that's what's allowing it to go quantum. And it's using parallel realities to extract resources. That's what the guy's saying. We're using quantum computers to extract resources from parallel worlds. The guy says it in the recording, the creator of the largest quantum computing system right now, D-Wave. So what this means is that when you reverse engineer it, instead of going into duality, when you let it propel you, what's being said is that you can access yourself on other parallels in order to pull back in all of your resources to prime. And then when you have that, you become indivisible. And when you're indivisible, now time cannot hold you. Done. All this whole conversation is just to explain that. So lastly, what I meant by, because the person did comment that I talked about how depths don't sleep. So what I meant by depths do not sleep is that it's known that mastery of meditation allows you to remain on the same frequency when technically asleep versus awake. So you don't actually go into theta like most people. So like when you start breathing the proper way, your body kicks in and starts doing that even when you're asleep. So it rides you into higher frequencies and then allows you to remain out of theta. And when you're out of theta, it's like you're still awake, but you're to everyone else sleep. And this gets you into the continuum. This gives you full access to the dream world as a consistent lucid dream. So you have the ability to interact with total consciousness uninterrupted. And that's what the conversation is about today. So you actually decide, well, I need to go and speak to so-and-so on the other parallel. This is just getting ridiculous. They're beefing with me here because we're speaking this English language and they're completely confused. I need to go and talk to the other version of them that actually is harmonic with where I'm at. You see, so because what happens with everyone is they have some harmonic. See, on the realm right now, people hang around who they're closest like, and they get away from people who are the furthest like them. But if you're a whole deck, then there's no one to get away from. You see what I mean? So just understand the reality, people function within their own suits, within their own elements, and that's who they have around them. So on other realities, though, they may be fire here, but on another reality, they're water. So if something needs to really be conveyed, especially with compassion, then you go visit them there. And you say, well, listen, on the other parallel, we're just totally not seeing eye to eye. And there's no suspicion about why. And it's because this one's been hacked. So when you hack one of these, it can create walls and division between all of them. I mean, this is a very sensitive system. We don't actually have any idea. We can say we do, but we don't have any idea of how many of these matrices other human beings are trapped in. But what we do have an idea of is how to free them, because that's all we need to know. You see, I don't need to know how many matrices my biorhythm is stuck in. I just need to know the formula of getting them free. This is what I mean by realizing where your current is going and how emotionally charged you are. Like if you're getting charged on negative energy by just, oh my goodness, this happened to thousands and not millions of cosmoses and blah, blah, blah. And then, but what can you do? You need to get to what you can do. So the next question is, Lawrence C. asks, in many words, how do I choose my next go around in the next life, since I don't want to be in a mind control matrix anymore? And so I take in the pointers from the day. We realized, and this was for last show, when we think about the time and attention it takes to control every aspect of our lives and our current condition, we are often deterred and think it's too complicated. So we would rather go with the cookie cutter version that the society in many instances gives us. And that means the cut path in society: Christmas, tarot decks, cards that lead, paths that lead nowhere, etc. So we need to know that what we're asking for when we say that we want to create our own reality and be prepared for the work and the labors that come with creating the creations that we host. Meaning, think about it. When you say, well, I want to be in control of my own reality, because of if you're trying to do that as a card or a character, it's going to collapse your deck. But if you tap back into the totality of yourself, then you're prepared for the works and the labor. See, the annual is known as the works and the labor. Some even call it the works and the labors of Hercules. This is because when you are going through these different aspects of yourself and learning more about yourself, it's work, it's labor. It's like delivering a child. So this is what's meant by this whole process, a cycle that we must go through to birth ourselves. But we need to understand that, hey, this is a real thing, though. This is not words. This is not that fictitious word game that people play. Like they say, you can rap and you can talk all this crazy stuff, but when the guns come out, are you actually there with the gun too? Most of them, no. So what happens is that there's a big misconception between words and then actual actions. So break down that wall. So other than that, we're left to the current projection and its overseers, meaning if you don't tap into your quantum being, especially if you're lost in tapping into the past and things that you can't change, it's all being hosted by these current control beings. And they love dropping new seeds into the bucket of the madness that they have going on to keep everyone trapped into this illusionary matrix with this English language. Going on, someone asked about me finishing the statement about the distilled water and what happens if it's not mineralized. And this is because I got into a little confrontation with someone a while ago about needing to mineralize distilled water. And this person went back and forth about how distilled water does not need to be mineralized. And the conversation was about how distilled water by itself, when left alone and untreated, does leach minerals from the body. The person goes on and that, no, it does not leach minerals from the body, etc. So I was in a laboratory about 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually maybe a little bit longer than that, and they had all sorts of weird machines in the laboratory. This was about, millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment. And one of the things that they had was real water. This water was $250 a gallon. And I said, wow, why is this water so expensive? I just thought lab water was when the water was, it had, it was very clear. And he said, well, first of all, water is never really clear. You can get it. Most people are down to parts per million. We need parts per billion. Now, this water is now down to 150 or whatever parts per billion. And I said, well, wow, but can you drink that? And he said, man, if you drink this water, maybe a teaspoon, but if you drink a whole cup, you'll die, because it will immediately basically explode in your body with trying to extract and bond with as many minerals as possible, because that's what water is always looking for, to bond. It's looking to bond with minerals. So this proves if the water is already low on minerals, it's going to try to bond with more minerals from your system. So somebody asked me, or two people asked me to finish that, so I'm finishing it for you. Remineralize, because there is a real thing. You need to know your knowledge, not going off with somebody, this is how I feel. There's so many people that go into this is how I feel about it, and this is what intuition, but none of this intuition and feeling that they have is based on anything real. That's the GMO. So we have to be careful of that. So person says, you mentioned avoiding chakra opening substances around digital sounds and electrical environments. I do work in a studio with music, and there's a lot of digital sounds, but I use chakra opening substances to boost my creativity. What should I do? And I say, first and foremost, as I mentioned, you don't want to get crazy about this. I listed in that show, I think it was the first show or episode 1, 40 pointers of what to avoid when using chakra opening substances. But to do all 40 of those simultaneously may present some issues. So you want to do as many as possible using your own discretion. And what's most important to remember is that in the studio, there are tons of electronics. So even a walk outside and around the block, when you're doing your chakra opening substance, will assist you before, sitting into this front of this huge mixer and just getting all that implementation. Because normally when you walk the block, clear your head, clear yourself, you come back, then you can perform, you could do what you need to do. So there's a pointer. Next question is, you spoke on things being implemented to assist children. I have a 9-year-old that I'm wondering how to begin implementing lifestyle changes. What are you suggesting? And what I'm doing right now is I'm actually working heavily on getting something viable to get children out of the tailspin that we're dealing with right now. I mean, of course, our children are under attack more than anything. We, being in this matrix, have to work. The children is left to their own devices sometime, with the TV, with the food, with the teacher. It's coming from every single angle. Currently, what I'm looking into is actually Waldorf's schools method that Rudolf Steiner put into play before the manipulation. These techniques have been actually removed from the Waldorf curriculum, but it was Rudolf's intent to begin to teach children more about spiritual aspects of things. And apparently there are many keys in this literature, and you can do your own filtering of how the child's psyche functions in conjunction with specific techniques. And there's a great deal of this information and knowledge available on the internet, but now you must do the work. It's not just like, hey, Sevan, tell me what to do, and I go do it. It's about, you need to do what I'm having to do myself, even especially in the time that I'm allotted, going through, at this point, Steiner's work to see what was really put through and then what can be implemented in today's society. Jack Tesoro asks, in short, how can I further integrate a better diet in order to not be influenced by the bowels or the lower frequency, especially in an environment where many people overindulge? In addition, where do I draw the line in order not to get crazy about the whole dieting thing? And my response is, I recommend actually researching the effects of the diet on one's consciousness, meaning do the work of understanding what these chemicals actually do, because then it's not that hard to, tell yourself exactly why you're doing what you're doing. You can look into Sebi's work. Obviously, there's quite a few people out there. You can look into Cassar's work. And so that's Cassar or Dr. Sebi and other literature in order to gain the knowledge. Like, we got to get familiar with this re-education process because, like I said, if you see some of the Chinese children, from the time that they even come out of the womb, they're already learning. They're very accustomed to this learning. So we have to retrain ourselves because we're living in a very slacky poo reality where they just want us to basically fill the blanks in and do the multiple choice. You have to get familiar with gaining knowledge. So I need to speed through this. We got about 4 more minutes left. Then I go, then stick to that diet, find a diet that works for you. Stick to that diet as much as possible when allotted. Always keeping in mind that if you used to eat horribly, then, you're always doing better than what you did before. So don't go into the whole guilt trip, and because that could be equally as damaging. Oliver Frank asks, how can he take further advantage of the talent that he has with his eyes? Because he's been able to use his eyes in order to, project deeply into the reality and see the truth. I go at further eye training can be accomplished through the third eye diagram. Just Google third eye diagram resistance 2010, all one word. You'll see some diagrams, and then utilizing those diagrams, you can begin to merge your consciousness. It's another way to achieve balance. And then also look into Sananga. It's able to increase the visual clarity, also soul clarity. It's an indigenous root and a root used by the indigenous people. And this actually gives more access to clarifying the gateway to the soul. Going on, Zachary Thompson asks, with after-death timeline choices for reincarnation, how do I go about choosing a timeline that is not a part of the MK Ultra program? My response is, that's the whole thing. Make this your last reincarnation into heavily nested, mentally altering matrices by solving the riddle now of how you create worlds. This show delivers a lot of the keys about realizing the other tools you have that can transcend taking actions just literally and physically. It allows you to develop hyperdimensional tools that can be used at the inception point. So read that over again, listen to it over again, think about what I'm saying. The reincarnation into matrix-based MK Ultra latent realities does not have to be your reality. It doesn't have to even be a part of your psyche unless you put it in there. Someone asked, 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes left. Any advice for youngsters who may be spending a lot of times behind bars? For sure. Psych yourself out, meaning that, when I had to do my time, I just had to say, well, this is going to be the time that I didn't spend at that Ivy League school because I wouldn't have been able to do nothing there anyway. So use it as an opportunity to get an A+ self-taught education, absorb all the encyclopedias and be known for knowledge in there, not foolishness. That's also how you stay out of the trouble and the stream of trouble that goes through those places. Lastly, learn how to meditate. And you will quickly be able to gain the ability to lucid dream, since you won't have as many distractions. Plus, the consciousness will use that outlet to get out. And in that, you can begin transforming people from the inside out. We work inside out. That's what we do. So any blueprint that has the inside out thing going on, you'll find us. Daniel Hutchison, a really great friend of mine, asked, he says that Taoist medicine speaks of the direct correlation between the mind and concentration and meditative function on the body's musculature, meaning the muscle system. Can you express the importance of being able to develop this muscle system, not so much as a prerequisite, but as a method of knowing oneself and exploring the mind's muscle connection? My response is, let's consider how much balance of health plays an important role in the ability to meditate, think clearly, and feel our best. If you're sick, it's so hard to meditate. It's so hard to do anything. You just want to feel better. So from this alone, we can only conclude that the better the physical condition is, the more you're able to hone in many of your spiritual skills and have the potential to be. And I say potentially because we all know that we are supreme. Okay, so what I'm basically saying in a nutshell, because I'm running out of time as we always do, is that if you have the ability to engage in anything that will stimulate your total consciousness further, especially even physical, engage and push yourself, because you're running the gauntlet. Learn your preconceived limits and then transcend them. Okay. And the last question was about how the demerge functions with the reverse Christ agenda in our consciousness. And the last thing I'll say, 30 seconds, is that's what we talked about today, that the monad supposedly will split into all these pieces. One of those pieces are the demerge and the Christ, or the reverse antichrist. So we have those on parallels. When we merge everything and become indivisible, then we mate all of that back with its pair. It cancels itself out as something individual, and then it becomes part of wholeness. Wholeness and balance and vibrations to everyone. I'll see you next Saturday, or in between, on that quantum.
Come in the likeness and the image of God, 'cause you can be like that with all that humbleness and all